Good morning. Good Tuesday morning. Okay, so today we're going to talk about my most favorite way of knitting, which is Continental. And I didn't even start doing Continental until maybe, 5 or 6 years ago when a good friend of mine, Vicky, saw me knitting and she was like, "Hey girl, don't you know that there's a faster way to knit?" And here I'd been knitting for, by that time, probably at least, 20 years, maybe more. So she said, "Why don't you learn how to do continental knitting?" I was doing English knitting, which is that throwing, which I showed you yesterday. And she saw me and she goes, "I'll show you a new way and you'll love it and you'll never go back to English." And I was skeptical at first. I was like, "Yeah, but I've been doing it this way for forever since, that's the only kind of knitting I ever learned." And so when she told me this way, I was like, okay, maybe I'll try it and maybe I'll like it. So I tried it and it actually took me probably, about a week to really get the rhythm of it because it's completely different. Instead of holding the yarn in your right hand and throwing with it over your right needle, you hold the yarn in your left hand, almost like people who crochet hold their yarn in their left hand and tension it with their pinky. So the yarn is wrapped around your pinky and you kind of keep the tension by your pinky instead of by how tightly you hold the yarn in your right hand. Now, I also have been crocheting for a really long time, so I was familiar with the idea of holding yarn in my left hand and tensioning it because that's how crocheters do. They use the hook with their right hand and they hold the yarn in their left hand and crochet and pull the yarn out with their hook. So for me, it wasn't a huge transition to go from throwing my yarn over my needle to holding the yarn in my left hand. But it was still awkward because I wasn't used to picking out the yarn like you do with continental knitting instead of, pulling it around like you do with throwing. So enough talk about it. I'm going to show it to you and I'm going to try a new thing again. Since yesterday, the whole, mirror image thing happened with Facebook Live, I actually see that there is a way to turn the camera around so that it's not going to be mirrored and you'll actually be able to see what I'm doing the right way. So here we go. I'm going to try it. I'm going to flip it around when I put it up on my little camera holder over here. So here we go. Come with me. We're going on a trip. And we're going to hook it up to here. And then we're going to flip it around. Ooh, hey, that works pretty good. I can actually even see what I'm going to be recording. All right, so let's move this up a little bit here. Okay, yeah, that's better. Okay, so now we have the work that I was working on the other day. And now we're going to do, instead of holding the yarn in my right hand, I'm going to loop it around my pinky like this and then put my pointer finger down into it like this so that on my pinky I've got it wrapped around once and that will hold the tension of my yarn, and then my forefinger holds the yarn up a little bit like this so that I can go in and grab it with my right hand. Okay, so here we go. Let's do this. For a knit stitch, we are going to hold the yarn in the back. But when I'm doing knitting with something that the side is going to show, I often like to have a little chain on the side. This one doesn't have it very well. Actually, it does right here because I was doing it over here. But here's another example. The side of this washcloth is going to be seen all the time, so I like to have that side be a nice little chain. So in order to achieve that, we need to slip that first stitch. So I'm going to slip the first stitch, not going to work it, and then I'm going to start knitting. So the way to knit with Continental is I pull the yarn out, so I can see that loop. So I'm starting at the bottom left, I'm pulling it out, and then I just grab the yarn. So I'm still wrapping it around counterclockwise, but instead of, wrapping it around, I'm just kind of grabbing it with the tip of my needle. And sometimes I'll even hold that yarn here with my forefinger so that when I go through the old stitch, it doesn't fall off. and then I just pull the old stitch off. Okay, so let's do that again. So I'm going to go down from the bottom left-hand side of the stitch and grab the new yarn and pull it through the old yarn. See, I didn't even use my forefinger that time. All right, so let me show you how quickly this can actually go when you're knitting with Continental stitch. Zoop, 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 zoop. See how fast that can go? Because you're just pulling the yarn through the old stitch instead of having to throw every time. Throw, 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 throw. You're just grab, 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 grab. Okay? Now, this Continental technique works really great for knitting, but it also works great for purling. So I'm going to show you purl on this side. All right. So here we go. Let's do purl on this side. And like I did before, I'm going to slip that first stitch so that I get a nice little chain on the side. And then, as you can see, I'm not holding the yarn up this time. I'm holding it down with my finger. Okay? So now this time, instead of going from the left-hand side of the stitch, I'm going to go from the right-hand side of the stitch, and I'm going to go through the front of it. And then I'm going to wrap this yarn around. Again, I'm doing it counterclockwise and then pushing back on the stitch and letting the old stitch go release from the left hand needle. So let's do that again. I'm going to go down from the right hand side to the front, wrap the yarn around and let the old stitch off. Around, let the old stitch off. Around, let the old stitch off. Now, I have seen some people, when they're doing Continental, they do their purls a little bit differently, but this is how I do my purls, and it goes really fast once I get into the rhythm of it, and you can get it to go really fast too. Sometimes the yarn slips off that finger, but it's easy to put it back on. I'm just kind of pushing down on the yarn with my finger to wrap it around counterclockwise. See that? I'll go slow again. Down through the front of the yarn, around, pull it back, let it off. Down through the front of the yarn, around, pull it off. Super easy and super fast. All right, so now I'm going to show you the difference between doing English and doing Continental when we have more than one type of stitch on one row. So say I wanted to do a purl, or a knit and a purl, and then knit, purl, knit, purl. That would be what's called a seed stitch. Now, when if I'm using English version of knitting, then each stitch I would throw. Then, in order to get it right for the purl, I would have to throw to set it up for purl, then throw again for the purl, then throw again to set it up for knitting, then throw again for knitting. So see what I'm saying? You have to throw it twice as many times because you're throwing it back and forth between the stitches as well as for the stitches. Okay? So throw between a stitch, throw for the stitch. Throw between a stitch, throw for the stitch. Okay? Now look at the difference. Now I'm going to do it with Continental. Instead of having to throw twice as many times, all I'm going to do is move my finger back and forth. And I'll go a lot faster. Knit, purl, knit, purl. See how much smoother that is? There's no throwing. There's no taking time to move it between the stitches because it's just a movement of your finger back and forth. Okay? This is one of the big main reasons why I love Continental so much, is because I do a lot of work that has more than just knit stitches all the way down, or more than just purl stitches all the way down. I like to do lots of textures in my knitting. So when I would do that, I would almost, when I was doing English style, I would almost avoid patterns that had, you know, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, because there was so much throwing, throw. But now it gives me, with Continental stitching, it gives me the freedom to just enjoy and not have to worry about, how many throws am I going to have to do for this stitch pattern, because it's just a movement of my finger back and forth. All right, so that's just a quick overview of Continental and why I love Continental so much. So let me get my face back on here so we can talk together instead of just seeing my fingers. Let me flip this around really quick so you can see me again. Oop. Oh, there I am. There you are. Okay, so that was my example of continental stitching. And so tomorrow we're going to go over a new type of knitting that I've never tried before, but I find extremely interesting. It's a kind of knitting that you put the yarn around your neck and then you flick your thumb in order to knit. I've never done that type before, where you're flicking your thumb. What? That's called Greek or Portuguese knitting, and I'm going to practice it a little bit before I show you, but we will go over that tomorrow, and I hope you can join me. I'll be here around 10 o'clock. I know I'm a little early today. Sorry, guys. I have a busy day today, so I decided to do my live a little bit early. But I normally am on around 10 o'clock, so if you can catch me tomorrow, you'll get to see how to do Greek knitting. I hope you have a great day. See you next time.